Hello, and welcome to the 2023 Netreo user group get together and my session on device management and dynamic device onboarding. My name is Brian Olsen, and I am the Director of Engineering Operations here at Netreo. My role is to oversee pretty much all aspects of our operations engineering team as it relates to Netreo engineering services around support, implementation, as well as the delivery of our trusted advisory services, or TAS, as we like to refer to it as. A bit of background on myself. I've been with Netreo for 7 years now, and prior to joining Netreo, I used the Netreo infrastructure management system, what was at that time called OmniCenter, for just over 10 years as part of an MSP offering with a nationwide IT service provider. If you have any questions during the session, please feel free to post into the chat, and I'll be happy to answer those for you. When we talk about dynamic device onboarding and device management in general, the best representation I feel of this workflow is within the device management page in the Netreo instance. So let's go ahead and start our journey there, and I will pull up the screens. To access the device management screen, you simply go to Administration and Device Management. What this page is representing is the workflow a device takes from the moment it goes through a discovery process to the moment it becomes a managed device within Netreo. The first tab we're going to look at is Discovery. The first column we're going to look at is Discovery. And there are multiple ways that we can discover new devices and make the determination as to whether or not they can and should be managed. The first way is through IP subnet scanning. With IP subnet scanning, Netreo is crawling out the different subnets that I've configured within the system and looking for new devices that respond or IP addresses that respond. Now, they could be subnets that I define in here by specifying the subnets individually, or I can also enable subnet scanning, where Netreo will go to a seed device, discover subnets, and then crawl those subnets and look for additional subnets and new devices, and so on and so on and so on. If it finds a device that responds, then it's going to put it into a table that it will later inspect to determine whether or not that device can be managed or should be managed. Another option is through virtualization, and this is pointing Netreo towards a virtualized management console, VMware, Hyper-V, and querying that system for new hosts, guests, data stores, clusters, and adding those as managed objects. Another option is Overview. Overview is primarily an MSP tool. It is essentially an aggregator for multiple Netreo instances. And I say it's an MSP, mainly an MSP tool, simply because most MSPs will deploy an individual Netreo instance, a customer, and then each of those systems will then report back to an overview system. The way the overview device management works is if any of those individual remote systems discover a device, we're going to add them as well. Another option is through cloud, and this is querying your cloud services such as Amazon, Azure, Google, and looking for new devices within there, and then also including them in the device addition process. We have other options such as ServiceNow. ServiceNow is pointing Netreo towards your ServiceNow CMDB and querying it for devices. You can create filters to control which devices get added, if they're in a particular CI, if they're a particular manufacturer mix, or really any custom field within ServiceNow you can use as a filtering method. If you also access that ServiceNow instance via a proxy, you can configure that proxy information in here as well. We have SD-WAN, logging, and traffic. Logging and traffic is if there is a device in the environment that sends Netreo syslogs, SNMP traps, NetFlow data, CFlow data, SFlow, JFlow, we're also going to try to add those devices as managed objects. So once it's gone through this discovery process, we essentially build an interrogation table of all of these IP addresses that we've found in the environment. We're going to add a checkbox here to signify that we have discovered devices through these models. whether it's IP subnet scanning, virtualization overview, et cetera. So this is going to let me know that the processes that Netreo has used to add devices within my environment so far have been cloud and logging. If I were to start getting NetFlow, for example, from devices, then this will show up a little green checkbox here letting me know I'm now adding devices because devices are sending flow to me. Once they get into the interrogation table, we have a process that will go through there and check a few things on those IP addresses. First and foremost, can we ping them? Is that IP address, or is that do we have connectivity to that IP address? Then what we're going to do is we're going to try to see if any of the credentials that are configured in Netreo for authentication for SNMP, WMI, SSH, any of those things works on the devices, that we have to be able to query the device and collect data from it in order for it to be a managed object. The third thing we're going to do is make sure that the device does not match any of the device filtering out rules that you can also configure. So I can say, based on a naming convention, don't add devices that have BCI in the name, as an example. The interrogation process is going to look for those things. As it does that, and as it discovers those attributes, it's going to flag them within any of these tables. So as a device administrator, for example, I know that there are some devices in my CMDB, but they're not getting added into the Netreo. I can go into the interrogation table, look at, for example, failed, click into here, and this is going to give me a list of all the IP addresses that failed, how we tried to add them, and then I can come back in here, click the boxes next to the one, and reinterrogate them and have it go through the process. This becomes very useful if, for example, you've put devices into your CMDB, and again, I'm using CMDB simply as an example, but I put the devices in my CMDB. I know they're on the network environment, but I've yet to actually go and configure them as managed objects. For example, I haven't added Netreo's IP address into an access list that's tied to the SNMP read-only string, just as an example. Well, I know that when that device becomes manageable, I want to make sure it gets added into the system. Once I've done all those configurations, I can come into here, reinterrogate it, and then that interrogation engine is going to go back through, try to query it, and if it succeeds, go ahead and add it. It's going to then show me in the added list all the devices that were added via the method, the name, the dates, and last time we got status of them. Other fields in here, just so you know, is there's new. That means that these are the number of devices that have been placed into this interrogation that Netreo still needs to go through that interrogation process for. Failed means that it is a device that we either could not connect to via ping, or we could not query it to get system level statistics from it. Added represents that those devices were added in the tool set successfully. Enabled is an attribute that essentially says that devices are in the system. They had been at one time auto-disabled. There's rule sets to, for example, if a device has been down for a certain amount of time, automatically disable it, but then check it every hour. And once it becomes re-enabled, once you can reconnect to it, re-ping it, as an example, we will set that flag to enabled. So this list is going to show me the devices that have gone through that onboarding process of being disabled and then re-enabled because of connectivity was reestablished. Auto-disabled are the ones that we got brought into the interrogation table, but we stopped being able to get connectivity to it. We automatically set that flag to auto-disabled, as I just mentioned, and then check every hour and try to re-enable it again. If we do, it goes back to enabled, we re-interrogate it, and we add it. Filtered is where I'm going to find those devices that we've discovered, but they matched a filter list saying, don't add these devices because of the naming convention. I don't want them added. And duplicates are when we discover IP addresses that we already know are associated with a device that's configured in Netreo already. So this is to prevent us from adding a device multiple times because the device may have multiple IP addresses like VLAN interfaces or multiple physical interfaces. Going back to the device management page, once we've gone through the discovery process, the interrogation process, After these devices get into this added here, they're now going to go through the configuration portion of device onboarding. And it goes through basically essentially two different parts of the tool set. One is auto configuration. Auto configuration is a set of configuration parameters based on device attributes that I can do things with, like put them in particular groupings or assign them to service engines, which are essentially polling engines that you deploy without the environment, depending on your environment and the topology. I can set them into different strategic groups or sites, functional groups, or I can even do things like, if this is a SQL server, if SQL's running on it, add the SQL subtype so I get additional SQL statistics on it. So as an example, I can create an auto configuration rule that says if there is an auto start Windows service called SQL, set the property of device subtype to MS SQL. So that way, as that device goes through that onboarding process, we're going to discover it's a Windows server. We're going to check to see what services are running on it. If we find a service called SQL, we're going to make sure that we add this subtype to it so that we also get all of the SQL relatable stats. I can also base these rules on device name, sys description, sys allocation. If the device is running BGP, for example, I may want to get specific BGP stats. If it's specific TCP or UDP ports runnings on it, if it's on a subnet, I can also do what's called device attributes, which are match keyed pairs. So that's useful, for example, if I want to enable the QoS subtype on a subset of devices as they're onboarded, but I want it based on a particular model or chassis. I can create an attribute that says chassis is V2 as an example. Go ahead, and if you query the device and that attribute is V2, add the QoS polling subtype to it. Going back down through the list here, the next thing that's going to happen is it's going to go through a templating control set. Templates in Netreo are a way of assigning controls to the information that we're getting. So controls being things like services. What kind of services do I want to monitor on that particular device? What kind of thresholds do I want to look for? Do I want to monitor for CPU utilization, memory utilization? Do I want to monitor for the number of BGP peers? Those types of things. And then these will trigger alerts in the event that one of those attributes is matched, or if a service check has particularly failed. Once it's gone through those rules, one of the last rules it goes through before it becomes a completely a managed object in Netreo instance is a validation or not validation rule. So in Netreo, you can specify whether or not once devices go through this entire process, if you want them automatically be validated devices. Once a device is a validated devices, we pull it for statistics, we check it for availability, we look for all the services, we add it to all the reporting, we put it in all the dashboards and the groupings and all those things that I've defined within the automated rule sets. And they are now alerting me if they have a problem. Non-validated means we go ahead and we do all those things and we still collect data on it, but we're not going to actually alert you because it's not a validated device. It's not a device that you've actually said, okay, this is a really great device. This is a device that I need to be woken up at 3 o'clock in the morning when there's a problem. You have the option of choosing those, either automatically validate them or not validate them. As an administrator, you can then come in here, look at the devices that are not validated, and then choose whether or not you want to go ahead and validate those individual devices. Once you do that, then those devices are fully validated. They're devices that are monitored, and they're going to alert you, and they're going to show up in your reports. They'll show up in all of your dashboards. So once we've gone through all of this process, then we go into under management. And these are the devices in my environment that are fully managed devices. The two references I'm going to see is one that our devices are monitored and devices that are disabled. Before I go device monitored, let me go into devices disabled. These are the devices that were in the Netreo instance. And they, for example, could be there for a day. They could have been there for 5 years. If a device, for some reason, stops responding, we can no longer connect to it. What Netreo will do is, after a configure time frame, and it's user configurable, we will automatically disable that device, meaning that this device has been down for 3 months. I don't want to keep getting alerting on it. I don't want to see it. You know, maybe from a workflow standpoint, you don't go in and you don't delete that device from the Netreo instance. We will flag it as disabled, meaning we will no longer monitor it. We will no longer pull it. It's been down for, again, as an example, 3 months. I don't need it in my reports. It's not going to show up anywhere other than if I search by name, or I go in and I look at this list. As an administrator, I can come back in here and I can look at these disabled devices. Now, in Netreo, even though the device has been flagged as disabled, we're still going to try to reach out to it every hour to see if it responds. And then after an hour, if it responds within an hour, or in that hour check, during that hour check, we're going to automatically re-enable it and make it a managed device. The thought process behind that is there are events where maybe you're swapping out one manufacturer router to another, or not, you're migrating one server from a physical platform into your VM environment, for example, and that's taking some time for whatever reason. And you want to make sure that when that device does come back online, you don't have to go back into your management tool and go ahead and re-add it again or enable it or anything like that. We can automatically do that for you. So we'll just keep checking out every once in a while. Are you live? Nope. Okay. An hour later, are you alive? Oh, great, you're alive. We'll turn monitoring back on. As an administrator, I can come in here, of course, and look at that, and I can see that the device is set to disabled because it's got this black thing. If I am an administrator and I want to enable it sooner, you certainly can do that just by coming into the device administration screen, clicking these things to enabled, and then saving it, and the device is going to get removed from that disabled list, and it'll start monitoring again. Going back to the device management page, the last thing I wanted to show you today was the devices monitor. So once all the devices have gone through this process, I can go to the device monitor, and this is going to show me an active list of all the devices that are in my tool based on their category they got put into, the device type they got set, the subtype, the site, the service engine, and the strategic group. And again, I think it's important to highlight that everything that shows up in this list was automatically done. As an administrator, I didn't have to do anything. All I had to do was point Netreo or in ways to discover devices, tell Netreo what it, create the rule sets to say what I want done when those devices get added, what groupings they want, what subtypes they want, what kind of stats I want to get from them, and it's going to happen automatically. I don't have to go in and add devices and configure them. All of that's done. Goes to the templates, all the controls get set. So I can look at my devices based on the category, device type. So if I come into device type, for example, I can see that I have 5 Cisco routers. I got a FortiGate switch in here. I got 10 remote DEM agents, which is the digital experience monitoring agents that we have. And then it's going to show me, if I click it down, those devices, how many services I'm monitoring, how many active instances are on there, whether or not that device is sending me flow logs, if I'm gathering CLI configurations from there, if I'm managing configurations for changes, things like that, that's going to show me as well in here. And then I can also go into the device itself and get to the device's dashboard. You can also, as a way of auditing the environment, just to find out how many devices you have in the system, how they're configured, where they're configured, whether or not we're pulling them, we're monitoring them, whether or not we're getting flow, we're not getting flow, or logs, traps, or any of those things. By emailing this list to you, scheduling it as a report, so it shows up in your desk every, whatever, week, 2 weeks, month, whatever, or exporting as a CSV. Very useful if you want to get an idea, for example, of how many instances you're monitoring on devices, or how many of your devices are successfully polling or not polling. For example, here I can see if my Windows servers only 33% of them am I collecting statistical stats on them, and 67% of them am I getting and managing event logs from them. I can get that as a report, so I can go ahead and as administrator make any adjustments I need to make on the system. That covers the device management and dynamic onboarding. Again, appreciate you joining the session today. If you have any questions, I'll be here for a little bit longer. Feel free to post them into the chat and I'll be happy to answer them. If you don't, enjoy the rest of NUGGET. Thank you.